Touchdown, Florida State. Hey, Seminole fans, it's time for another edition of the Osceola Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Osceola Podcast. Today we'll be looking back and recapping FSU's 36-31 loss to Boise State in its 2019 season opener. My name is Pat Burnham. I'm a writer for the Osceola and the host for today's show. I'm also joined by the owner and publisher of the Osceola, Jerry Kutz, and our guest analyst for today is former FSU offensive lineman and former college offensive line coach Mark Salva. Now, Coach Taggart has talked all year about having some dudes, and I agree with you. Two of those dudes are Dennis Briggs Jr. and Amari Gaynor. I think I like Leonard Warner III, too, and, of course, everyone knows about Marvin. But we've heard about the defense having dudes all through preseason camp. They roll out the 3-4 defense for the first game and give up over 621 yards. In your opinion, is it a combination of things? Is any one thing? Is it a combination of learning the system and maybe some guys don't fit in exactly where they're supposed to be, or have they misevaluated the personnel and how they're using them?
Yeah, there's a lot there. All right, so let me say this: when you go from a 4-3 to a 3-4, and if it's a typical 3-4, is you want those three guys, three defensive linemen, you want them to eat up space and blocks, right? You want them to facilitate double teams so that the linebackers, those 04 guys, can roam freely and, run downhill and fill gaps and do those kinds of things, right? I remember one time when I was, I lived in Nashville, and so I had a friend that coached for the Titans, and I went to go watch them practice one day, and he was sitting there watching film of the Patriots, and he, as we were looking at their defense, he drew a box around Vince Wilfork, Richard Seymour, and whoever those other guys were, right? And this is NFL. And he drew a box around, and he said, watch this. He runs a play, and there's a running play. And those three guys never got out of that box in the film. They held their ground. They were like, it was like trying to move granite blocks, So they're taking up blocks, and they're doing that. And you see, the linebackers just running free, just, shooting gaps and, making plays. And so that's kind of what you want. That's why you play this defense. And I don't necessarily disagree with the decision to go to a 3-4. I like a 3-4. If you're playing a lot of spread teams, the 3-4 is a really good system because you can bring pressure. You can bring, 4 or 5 man pressure, even 6 man pressures, and you're not necessarily sure where they're coming from. Right? Because those three guys are coming, but where are the next 2 or 3 guys coming from? It's easier to disguise pressure in the confused blocking schemes when you have guys standing up, moving around, doing those kinds of things. So I don't necessarily disagree with that. And for a spread team, now you can take out linebackers, put in nickel guys or dime guys or however you want to do it. So I don't necessarily disagree with that, right? And now Boise was more of a pro style. They were playing a lot of tight end wing, and we didn't necessarily line up great to that, But back to my point is, the scheme is designed for those runners to be able to disguise, and those three guys eat up blocks. So what was happening last night? Were those guys eating up blocks? Well, they didn't get blown off the ball much, but they were moving too much, right? So they would lose what I call their gap integrity. There would be 2 guys in a gap because a tackle would reach a guy or one of the down guys wouldn't hold on to, would get out leveraged, which means, he let the tackle reach him and then the guard could come around and block him and he could get up on a linebacker. So, we've got to do a better job holding our gap integrity and not moving so much on the defensive line. Then you start getting on the second level and, looking at the linebackers, looking at Woodby and number 5.
Jackson.
Watching those guys, there's a lot of indecision on exactly what to do. I mean, after I watched our game, I watched the Auburn game. And you watch those jokers running downhill, filling gaps, and I wish I'd seen more of that from our guy, when there's no, if it's one thing, if they got some eye candy out there, right? They get guys in motion, going in motion, ball off the line, hats pop up on the offensive line, they get a pass read. But it was still none of that. It was all run 1st and 10, tight end wing. They're coming off the ball, and they're kind of slow getting downhill, filling gaps. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's indecision. I just don't, I don't know what it is. But that's got to get better. And then, of course, the tackling, has got to get better. You're right, Jerry. They did pressure a lot. So when they did pressure, we pressured from from these 3-man looks from all over different parts of the field, and most of the time it was 5-man pressure. So what does that mean? So the 3 down guys and plus usually one other guy, maybe sometimes 6-man pressure. So when they went 5-man pressure, most of the time I don't know if it was most of the time, but from what I could tell, it looked like we were zone blitzing. So we were playing cover 3 and we were rushing 5 guys to get pressure. But when you do that, if you're rushing 5 guys, you've got 3 deep. That only leaves 3 for the underneath coverage, right? And so there's some big gaps in there, and you got to be able to cover those gaps. And that's why I think on some of those critical downs, especially in the third quarter when they were driving, they hit that one square in. That was a 5-man pressure with 3 deep, 3 underneath, and the guy turned into a gap, and the dropper wasn't quite sure, and that goes back into the scheme, right? So who were those guys dropping? Well, sometimes those guys dropping were number 11 and number 13. And look, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. They can learn, but is that the best thing that 11 and 13 do? I don't know. I watch 11 pass rush. I think he's a damn good pass rusher. 13 can rush the passer. Is their strength going out in space, covering a guy, and then making a tackle in space? I don't know if that's necessarily their strength, right? So right. Is that the best thing for them to do? Probably not. I'll tell you who can do it. It looked like 33 could do it. Amari, I think, could do that. So maybe you take Amari, make him a drop in, and make those 2 guys the rush ins, and you just got to flip strengths until you recruit to the point where you can get guys that can do both on both sides, where you don't have to flip them. However they want to do it. So those are some of the things I could see immediately that maybe were some issues and why they were gashing us. The other thing was on some of those, I know on the touchdown and on, I think, a deep throw going right to left, guys coming off the line, inside receivers, if you're pressing and if you're either playing man free or you're trying to play, 3 underneath, 3 over the top, you got to redirect receivers, right? If you're going to press, you got to give them a chance to go. You just can't give them free runs off the line. You got to redirect them and let them, disrupt the timing of the throws. A lot of times these guys are running right by, the coverage guys, and nothing's happening. They run right by them. Don't even lay a hand on them. Don't redirect them. No, nothing. And so they just, it's like pass Skelly. They're just wide open. Those are just little things that could be corrected immediately if they, I'm sure the coaches see that. I mean, I'm not telling anything that anybody that knows football wouldn't see, right? Those are the big things that really stood out to me as to, where did it go wrong? Why did we, whatever? It looked like we had an answer with the pressure. They started max protecting a lot. They started blocking 6 guys, and they were running, 2 and 3 receiver routes against our 3 deep, 3 underneath, and the guys were running free. And that's essentially how they were able to drive the ball late in the game. And that's why the pressure wasn't as effective as it was, unless we won an individual battle.
We hope you've enjoyed the first segment of this podcast. To hear the entire episode, as well as past and future podcasts and daily coverage of Seminole sports, please subscribe to the Osceola at theosceola.com. Sign up today and enjoy a free 1-week trial subscription. Try us. You can rely on us.